the 6th day of Vlogmas! Drinking by Vlogmas is still going strong. And today I am going to recommend a different type of Christmas reading list. So this is for people who are not yet feeling in the Christmas spirit, but they still want something that's perfect for the dark, cozy evenings. This is my spooky Christmas reading list. Now, I always love doing this in the first half of December before I've got fully into the let's read Jingle Bells kind of thing. Read Jingle Bells? That is not a book. I like to read scary things. There's something about December and Christmas and twinkly fairy lights that makes me want to read about ghosts. So I have got 8 ghostly books in this video. They don't all have ghosts in them, but some of them do, and the others are just ghosty, you think there might be a ghost, or you get that shivery feeling of someone being in the room that you can't see. First up is The 13th Tale by Diane Setterfield. So I just reread this one this year. I read it the first time a long time ago. It's Katie from Books and Things' favourite book, so she hosted a read-along and we all read it, and it's so much fun to revisit, and I'd completely forgotten what happens, so it felt like a surprise all over again. So it's one of my dual timeline favourite kind of books. So in present day, I don't know what time period that is, maybe the 80s, but in that modern bit, a woman named Margaret, who is a biographer, is contacted to write the biography of this very famous writer called Vida Winter. And she doesn't know why she's been chosen because she only ever writes about classic writers that are already dead. She hasn't even read any of Vida Winter's work, so she doesn't know why she's been contacted, especially as Vida Winter notoriously has never told anyone the truth about her life. Whenever she's asked about it in interviews, she always makes up a different story. So Margaret goes to meet Vida Winter and stays at her house and slowly uncovers the true story that she's telling her, as well as why she has been specifically picked to tell this story. There's so many twists and turns in this book that I did not guess, even when I was reading it for the second time, and it's definitely a really fun, spooky, cozy evening one, because while it isn't actually supernatural, there's definitely this ghostly sense to it. Both in the present day and in the flashbacks, in the houses, there's always this sense that there is someone else there is somebody watching, and before we uncover who that person is that's watching, it gives you that feeling of shivers running down your spine, which I love when I'm reading. And another one that is not actually ghostly, but just gives you that same spooky being watched feeling is And Then There Were None by Agatha Christie, which I have already talked about a lot recently and have another video coming up on this one, but it's great. It's so much fun. So it's about these 10 people who are all brought to a mysterious island by someone they don't know who all brought them there, and then they are all accused of crimes they are supposed to have committed throughout their pasts. And there's this very creepy rhyme that's framed on the wall about 10 little soldier boys and the way one by one they all vanish, and then there were 9, and then there were 8, so on, so on, so on, until and then there were none. And the rhyme starts to kind of come true with what happens to the 10 people on this island, which is really, really chilling. And the creepiest part, which I love, is that there are these 10 little china figures on the table when they first arrive, and every time something happens to one of the people, one of the china figures is mysteriously taken away. Which is the ghostliest, creepiest thing ever, and I love it. The Upstairs Room by Kate Murray Brown is a really good one for this category because it's kind of left up to you whether or not there are ghosts. So it's about this family who move into a new home, into this Victorian terrace, and the second they arrive, strange things start to happen. There feels like there is this mysterious presence in the house. They find this really, really creepy writing on the wall, but you can never quite tell whether the things that are happening are actually a ghost or whether it's this sort of physical manifestation of the family's troubles and their emotional state. And that's really, really clever, and it works really well, but it doesn't stop it from being any less terrifying. Especially at the beginning. I feel like the opening chapters are much more scary than it gets as it goes on, because you learn more. It becomes more about the family drama of it. For those opening chapters, I could not read at nighttime. Now, a book that is supernatural, but it's not really about ghosts, is The 7 Deaths of Evelyn Hardcastle. And this is a kind of rogue one for me to include because I didn't actually love the book, but I loved the premise of it so much that I kind of want to include it on here anyway. With that one, I kind of wondered if it was just me struggling to understand it and struggling to keep up with all the different threads of it, whereas someone who's slightly better at reading those super complicated books might love it. And I thought the premise was great. It's about a guy who has to solve a murder. So he has this one day in this house. At the end of the day, a woman named Evelyn Hardcastle dies, and he has to solve how it happened by living the day on repeat until he can solve how it happened. Every day that he wakes up in a new character's body. So he experiences the day from their perspective, and his own personality slightly changes to fit that character. So some days he will be more clever, and some days he'll be faster at running or whatever. So he has to use each character's kind of individual skill set combined to solve the murder. And he can also pass messages to himself if he remembers that he's going to meet this person on a day, because he lived it from their perspective before. He can like tell himself a clue, which is very, very, very confusing. And I think that's where I got a bit stuck with it, especially because there's this like whole other backstory of why this has happened and who has put him into this puzzle. And that was all where for me it just got a bit too much and got a bit too silly, but it's such a cool idea. So if you're wanting to try something really unique and odd, that I think would be a fun, spooky, Christmassy, dark evening one. Especially as there is this one really bloody terrifying character who wears a plague doctor's mask, and I didn't know what that was when I was reading it, so I kept just not knowing what to picture. I eventually googled it, kind of wished I hadn't, because it's such a scary mask. Why would they wear those masks? So I kept having to switch the light on at night because I thought I saw this creepy guy in my room. So it's definitely a spooky one, but it's also mainly just like a fun mystery that you have to solve. My hat! Okay, we're into real ghost territory now with The Haunting of Hill House by Shirley Jackson. Again, Rogue One, because I didn't love this book, but this was a book that I read and was like, yeah, it was okay. But then I went to book club and talked about it, and by the end of our conversation I felt like I liked it so much more because there was actually quite a lot to unpick in this book. It wasn't super, super creepy. I was never actually scared while reading it. It's sort of scary in the same way that the TV show Haunting of Hill House is scary, even though they are totally different stories. They're sort of about real life scary things like mental illness and addiction in the TV show and that kind of thing haunting you, but then kind of turning it into a literal manifestation, so those things are kind of actual ghosts that are haunting you. And that's quite clever. So having talked about it a lot in my book club, I ended up being like, oh, I actually do really like that book. I thought that was very clever. And the only reason I was disappointed the first time around is because I thought that it was going to be absolutely terrifying. So anyway, that was a weirdly negative review for something that I'm recommending. I think if you're liking the TV show and you like that level of not that scary but clever kind of ghost story, then you would probably also enjoy this. Okay, now going into actually terrifying books. So last year I read The Apartment by S.L. Gray, and that had me so scared because I did keep having to turn on the light in the middle of the night. I kept having to get my dog to come and sit on the bed with me while I was reading it because I was like, I can't be here alone. It's so creepy. It's about this couple who go for a weekend break to Paris and they rent this apartment. But when they get there, the apartment is absolutely horrible. It's nothing like what was advertised. They want to leave straight away, but they don't get any answer from the couple who lent them the apartment. And it is, so scary. The creepy things that they find in that apartment and the creepy people that they meet and the way that it affects them is so scary. And again, it's one of those really clever ones where it's like, is it supernatural? Is it all in their head? But if it is all in their head, is that just actually even scarier? It's one of those. And it doesn't give you a conclusion, so it's up to you to decide how you want to interpret it. I find this one absolutely terrifying, but I also loved it. And then there's Night Film by Marisha Pessl, which I had been wanting to read for so long until I finally read it this summer and just whizzed through it because it was so page-turning. So this is about a journalist who is investigating the death of a girl who is the daughter of a famous filmmaker. And so you get all of these cool things in here. You get all these like web pages and news articles that are all about this filmmaker who has this massive cult following. A lot of his movies were banned for being too dark, so they were shown at these underground special screenings. There's all this mystery around him and the films that he was creating, and there are all these rumours about him. And as you delve further and further into the book, you find out more and more disturbing things about this filmmaker and his life, and how kind of terrifying he was as a figure, and possibly actually like demonic, and what happened to his daughter, and how she ended up also possibly caught up in this dark magic. And it gets so scary. Once again, as all my favourite spooky books do, it plays with the idea of whether or not things are actually supernatural or in your head, and which answer to that is actually more scary. This one does take a more definite conclusion though after feeding you both options. So that's fun if you don't like the ambiguous ones I've been talking about before. And it was bizarre. Like, be prepared, this one is bizarre. But you get so absorbed in it because there's such a full, rich world. Like, the fact that Marisha Pessl has painted such a full picture of the cult following of this filmmaker. It's kind of like House of Leaves. It's almost like you believe this filmmaker existed and that you're reading real internet archives and web pages about him. You sort of forget that all of that's made up. You just get really, really sucked in and start to believe that you're sort of uncovering the real mystery behind this filmmaker. You sort of forget that he's a fictional filmmaker in the first place. So that was great and will absolutely terrify you just in time for Christmas. Now, the final book on this list does not fit in with the theme at all because A, it's not a recommendation because I've never read it, and B, I don't think it's ghosty in any way. I don't know, maybe it is. As I say, I haven't read it, but I had to include it because I'm definitely going to be reading it this December. The second I saw it, I was like, well, that's my perfect spooky Christmas read, and that's Murder at the Old Vicarage by Jill McGowan, and it just looks like a really cosy crime detective story, but set at Christmas and with murder in it. But I can't tell you anything about whether or not it's good because I haven't read it. So let me know if you've read that one, and then we can talk about it as soon as I've read it too. So do give this video a thumbs up if you also like to read spooky books in December. I feel like it's not a super common thing to do, but I just love it. It's like the perfect time for scary stories. And leave me a comment with your best ghosty recommendations. As you might have guessed from that, I love things where the line of supernatural is kind of blurred. I find that much more terrifying usually than I find the flat out ghost stories, because it's like you start to question yourself and it's terrifying. So yes, please do recommendations, and of course hit that subscribe button below because I am posting new videos right here every single day up until Christmas. But not on Christmas because I'll be busy. See you next time!